Hey guys, it's Monday and that means it's time for our weekend wrap-up. We're going to talk about the 4 games that went on this week and let you know who I think deserves Player of the Week honors. Cleo Lemon completed 23 of 33 passing attempts for 248 yards, 1 interception, and no touchdowns, despite hitting 8 different receivers during the game. He also fumbled 3 times, but the Argos were lucky enough to recover it twice. Although it is hard to be an effective quarterback when you're staring at the clouds, Lemon was sacked a total of 7 times over the course of the game. Chad Owens also had a sad showing with 3 fumbles and minimal return yards. When inserted into the offense, he had only 2 receptions for a mere 2 yards. As for Corey Boyd, he too lost a fumble on the day, but it looked after the first few drives that he wasn't feeling quite 100%. Noel Prefontaine was 3 for 3 on field goal attempts and averaged 42 yards on 6 punts. Now Buck Pierce on the other side threw 21 for 34, 165 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions, spreading the ball to 6 different targets and involving Fred Reed, who had 19 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown of his own. Justin Pillardi was 4 for 6 on his field goal attempts and averaged 40 yards on 8 punts. All credit in this one, though, goes to the defenses. It was a slow, grinding game littered with stupid turnovers and bad penalties, but the underdog, improbable Bombers take the win and start the season 2-0. This was a tale of 2 halves. It started out very much like the game before, slow, grinding, hair-pulling monotony. All the action came in the second half, with each side scoring the bulk of their points in the third quarter. Henry Burris completed 19 of 36 passes for 298 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, and ran 3 times for an additional 28 yards. He connected with 7 different receivers, including Nick Lewis, who had 4 catches for 100 yards and a 61-yard touchdown. Henry was sacked twice. And the BC defense also largely kept Joffrey Reynolds in check, keeping him to only 41 yards and 8 carries, and holding John Cornish to 22 yards on 4 carries. Reynolds and Burris both lost 1 fumble during the game. Rookie kicker Rene Paredes was 2 for 2 on his field goal attempts, proving that he may just be the right replacement while Rob Maver nurses his injury, and punter Burke Dales averaged 41 yards on 7 punts. Now on the other side, Travis Lulay completed 17 of 39 pass attempts for 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. He was also the Lions' leading rusher in the game with 4 carries for 28 yards. Sean Gore was the Lions' leading receiver with 7 catches for 94 yards, 3 more than G. Roy Simon, who had 4 catches for 50 yards. Returner Tim Brown averaged 9.8 yards on 5 punt returns and 21.3 yards on 6 kick returns. He did fumble the ball 1 time and turned possession back over to the Stamps. Veteran kicker Paul McCallum was 2 for 3, missing the 57-yard field goal attempt which would have won the game. It was an odd game, and everything seemed to be decided in the last minute or so, but the Stamps managed to hang on for the win and improve their record to 1-1. Anthony Calvillo was unquestionably the star of this game, going 29 for 43 and 5 touchdowns, tying Damon Allen for the most TD passes thrown by a CFL quarterback at 394. His favorite target was Jamal Richardson, who had 9 catches for 114 yards, but Brian Bratton hauled in 2 of the 5 touchdowns. He was complimented by Tim Maypray, S.J. Green, and Brandon Whitaker, who unfortunately had to leave the game due to injury. Darren Diedrich stepped up in his place and had 7 carries for 30 yards. Saskatchewan's Barron Simpson did sack Calvillo once, but he made up for it as he caught the secondary with their pants down time after time after time. Sean White was 1 for 1 on his field goal attempts and averaged nearly 39 yards on 6 punts. Darian Durant went 22 for 40 and 273 yards, completing 1 touchdown pass and throwing 0 interceptions. Weston Dressler caught most of those passes with 7 for 63 yards, but the touchdown went to Chris Getzlaff, who had only 2 catches for 29. Wes Cates carried the running game with 7 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. Neil Hughes stepped in on a short yardage play and added 1 touchdown of his own. Eddie Johnson was 1 for 1 on field goal attempts and did make a punt through the end zone for a single point. He punted 6 times for a total of 246 yards. Now the first half of this game was a shootout, with each side scoring 17 points before half. Montreal did run away with it in the second, adding 22 points and downing the Riders 39-25. They maintained their early undefeated status and dropped the Riders to 0-2. And in the last game of the week, we have Kevin Glenn, who completed 21 for 33 passes for 226 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. He was sacked only once, but the Eskimos' front 7 were in the pocket all night long, forcing him to throw inaccurate, incomplete passes. That same group stalled Avon Coburn at 9 carries for a mere 35 yards, and he was the Ticats' rushing leader. Glenn got the ball to 6 different receivers, splitting the favorite spot between Dave Stala and Maurice Mann, who each had 6 catches for 60 yards. Justin Medlock was 1 for 1 on field goal attempts and punted 7 times for 265 yards. On the home side, Ricky Ray went 21 of 31 for 388 yards and 1 touchdown. He was sacked once by the Ticats Stevie Baggs, but the O-line did a solid job of giving him time to make his reads and throw the ball. Fred Stamps proved to be the most prolific receiver with 7 receptions for 178 yards, and it was he who pulled in the touchdown. He was nicely complemented by Adarius Bowman and Marcus Henry, each of whom had 4 receptions for 69 and 43 yards respectively. But the big story in the Eskimo camp was Canadian running back Jerome Messam. After putting in a decent performance last week running mostly east-west, he had 17 carries for 104 yards and 2 touchdowns. Damon Duval was 2 for 3 on field goal attempts, missing one by mere inches to the left for a single point. He punted 5 times for a total of 216 yards. This is the first time the Eskimos have started a season 2-0 since 2005, which coincidentally is the last time they won a Grey Cup, and they have done so in tremendous beat-down fashion. And lastly, we'll talk about my picks for Players of the Week. The Canadian of the Week goes to Jerome Messam. His stunning performance earns this one in my books this week. 104 yards and 2 touchdowns, runs away with it. The offensive player is hands down Anthony Calvillo. Throwing 5 touchdown passes in a single game is no small feat, and tying Damon Allen for the most ever in a CFL career puts him at the top of my list. For the Defensive Player of the Week, it was a hard decision, as there were so many great defensive performances. But despite the fact that he didn't rack up stats, I have to go with Weldon Brown. It's a good thing not to have stats as a defensive back, because that means your receiver is catching the ball. Weldon Brown made sure that didn't happen and was a giant pain to Kevin Glenn. And the special teams player I'm going to give to Landon Talley of the Stampeders. On 5 kick returns, he ate up 150 yards against the Lions and gave the Stamps all kinds of field position.